Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be going over the WoW Developer Q&A for August 23rd. As normal, I just take the entire Q&A, which is usually an hour or longer, and I condense it down to 10 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the day. Today might be a little bit less. Some of the end questions were a little bit filler. So let's go ahead and get started and get into it. If it looks like I'm reading it all, I do have notes that I type out while I watch, so I don't forget anything. The first thing they talked about was about class changes, asking about, they don't ever do class-specific questions hardly, so they kind of did like a broad thing to open up the Q&A. Basically talking about when class balance type changes are going to happen. Basically, he said around Mythic rating and higher level keystones, expect a lot of class balancing and changing and tweaking and everything around then. So when they have a ton of data to go off of to try to make everything a little bit more equal. However, the end of the first week of September, so when the raid comes out, so the end of that week of the first week of raiding, so before Mythic, there will be some sort of a patch with class balancing, he said, and I don't know if I behold them to that, but that is what he kind of inferred, that it'd be, he specifically said the first week, end of the first week of September is what I have written down. Which basically, that's just on par with normal. People have been wondering because they did some changes to a couple class specs, but without changing anybody else's. But those were just because those ones were extremely weak to where it wasn't really fun to play. The next thing was about world mob scaling. If you don't know what this really is, it's basically just as more people are hitting a mob, its health goes up. Basically, it doesn't necessarily get that much more powerful, but its health increases. It scales because awards and Mythic quests scale with gear. They want the mobs to scale up in power with the players. So because you can get Azerite power and gear and things that are useful for you, and it scales up as the expansion goes. They want the mobs to scale as well. That's why mobs scale in general. However, it only scales about 1/4 as much as a player power scales. So as you get stronger, you are still dominating these mobs. Every time you get 10, if you get 10 times stronger, the mob only gets 2.5 times stronger. So it's not that big of a deal. Talking about leveling 110 to 120, it gets harder as you go if you had good gear at 110. This is not a good feeling, it's not a good experience. He said it's kind of the way it's always been in Warcraft ever since BC, but it's a valid criticism. It has to do with the zone scaling. Though he thinks the reason why it feels so much worse now is it happens to do with the zone scaling. You aren't progressing to harder content zones that make sense story-wise. So, sorry about that. What first thing I thought in my head was in BC, Shadow Moon Valley. That was like a hard zone. Like I felt like I needed to be prepared to go there, and it made sense that stuff was really hard to kill as I was leveling up from level 60. However, basically now since everything is just the level you are, so let's say you're level 111 and you're in Vol'dun killing something and it's really easy. And then when you get to you hit just ding 120, you go to a world quest in Vol'dun to kill the same mob, and it's much harder. He said that doesn't, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't. They wish that there was something they could do immediately, but there isn't. And it's because of how once you hit 120, everything's trying to scale for the end game, and as the game progresses, so they want to change that. They realize it doesn't feel good and it's kind of stupid, but. Basically, as of right now, he's hoping the next expansion is better, and maybe the next expansion after that's better, and it's something that they're trying to improve. Next question was about 110s killing 120s in World PvP. They put a hotfix in, I guess, to try to fix this or ramp it down a little bit. Basically, they were giving low levels a little bit too much help. That's something that they did in World PvP. They didn't want item level to matter very much, so what they did was, 110 was basically, 110 in really good gear would beat a 120 in greens. So, or could at least. They don't necessarily win. Basically, a 120 should win pretty much every time against a 110. They don't want it to be a complete slaughter to where you one-shot them, which I understand. But they did do a hotfix apparently that the 120 should be able to win now more often than not. In fact, I think every time. They asked if there's going to be a stat squish every expansion with a super high eye level jumps. Basically, what that means is like you just get to 300. Now a lot of us are approaching 340. There's probably some people approaching 350. And so this eye level is going to go way up again. So are they going to have to squish it back down like they did for BFA? He said not every expansion, but every other is very likely. This is something he touched on a previous Q&A as well. And it's because of end game progression is why this happens. So every tier goes up 15 item levels, normal, heroic to mythic. The reason why it's 15 is because that's just where they kind of settled in to where it felt correct to make it you want to do it. So if it was only 5, then really there's not that big of a gap between normal and mythic. So just doing heroic would probably be a good compromise. It would not really incentivize mythic rating at all. If it was even lower, then it wouldn't even incentivize heroic rating. So 15 is kind of where they settled at, and because of that, you're going to have high eye levels going up, and probably about every other expansion they're going to have to just do a stat squish. I talked about the removal of the looking for group add-ons and auto accept and everything like that. Basically, I like the way he summed this up. It was a button that you press to instantly finish your quest, and there was a huge gap between people who used it and people who did not. I was one who did not. Add-ons should not be mandatory to casual players. While I'm not a casual player, I don't try to flood my game with add-ons. I use the ones that are necessary and some that make my experience a little bit easier, especially maybe just a little bit looks better perhaps, or tracking an NPC for a rare spawn or something like that, which you could argue that's cheating as well. But I'm thinking more of the really casual player that doesn't use add-ons, computer's not very good, and all that kind of thing. I don't think that they should have to suffer just because they don't have an add-on. They asked to fix the auction house and guild bank features on large pop servers because they're extremely laggy. This is extremely true. I guess this is a huge issue and point of topic in the Blizzard office or the Warcraft office. The auction house tech has not kept up with the server tech, basically, so they've allowed more and more people per server without ever upgrading auction house stuff very much, and basically it's not able to keep up. It was interesting. I guess they've kind of narrowed it down to one of the main things about this is people putting everything in at one stack. So like especially the big AH traders, they buy everything up, they put it in for one stack. So what they're going to do is they're going to make the deposit of an item basically worth a percentage of what a stack of it would be or whatever. So it's going to incentivize you to put in a large stack of it. So they're trying to disincentivize you for putting in only one. So if you're really trying to make the maximum amount of gold, you will not just put in one stacks. Most people are extremely happy about this. I understand that if you're a hardcore AH person, you're probably not super happy about it, but unfortunately most of us aren't, and I am extremely happy about this. Guild permissions and they're more restrictive now than they've ever been. There isn't as many things to allow your guild people to do. There's not as many things for guild masters to do. Guilds are the backbone of the WoW community, he says. They're trying to give some powers back to the guild administrators already that were taken away. And they look to do more. Even they asked why it changed at all. With all the communities, Guild is now technically a community, and they've run through their Battle.net systems, which has some upside, which he stated. The upside wasn't really that great in my opinion, but also has this downside where all the functions weren't already implemented into it. So basically, they were just they realized that things weren't implemented, but they were going to see what people wanted back, and then try to integrate those things back in. Somebody asked about larger communities, but he didn't really get into that very much, the larger portion of it. It wasn't the only part of the question, but that was the main point of the question, the way I took it. Permabans on communities are coming, so like you can permanently ban somebody. So if you're a big community, you have an open link that someone can join your community. You might kick them out because they're not behaving, but they can just join back with that same open link. So they wanted you to be able to permaban them. They want feedback from players to design them around what players want. As I kind of said with the guild, they're going to add stuff in that players want. They are a new thing. However, he never mentioned anything about the player cap per community, which is what I kind of thought the question was about, and he didn't even mention that. So my guess is that they're not raising the player cap. I could be wrong though. Island expeditions are unrewarding for time spent in them. The weekly quest thing there for the island expeditions, he said that it's there kind of set there so you have an exit point of them. So that way you don't feel like you have to grind them all day, every day for your Azerite power. So you get that big bonus, and then you can kind of stop for the week if you want. I thought this was really smart because that's kind of something that they've tried to do more, is not make you feel like you have to, oh man, I have an hour, I need to, instead of spending time with my family, I need to log on and run some island expeditions. So they intentionally made artifact power work a little bit differently in this expansion, which I think is, again, I think that's pretty smart. Changes to Azerite gear being not tradable. Yes, they're going to make it tradable. He just said this was a mistake. Thank goodness. This was this is something they talked about in the last Q&A, and he went over why they were not going to make them tradable. And I thought they were decent points, but I have to admit that I thought maybe it'd be a little bit more prevalent or something. But just getting it off the last boss in a Mythic, I think basically, I don't think it'd be as big of a deal after Mythic Pluses are out and everything. But this first set of gearing up, it's definitely an issue. It would also be an issue when people are first getting their gear in a new raid. So like in 8.1, when a new raid comes out, people getting that first gear for that too. You know, everyone else has it and one person doesn't have it and they can't trade it to them. You know, that is an issue, and they're going to change it. They just admitted it was a mistake. Incentive bonus for war modes, more people in non-war mode than war mode. This is a specific person's, observance. I assume he's an Alliance player because Alliance are far less enrolled in war mode. Talking about shard imbalance at max levels. However, they didn't address this very well, and I'm not happy about it. I'm probably going to do an entire video about this. These blame it on big groups forming and disbanding, but before they disband, opposite faction floods that shard, and then when they all leave, that people are still in the shard finishing their quests. I think that's bullshit, frankly. And he also blamed it on people still leveling. Apparently, Alliance people don't know how to level. You can say what you want about the Alliance, but I think they're just as capable of leveling as Horde players are. The last thing I thought was relevant, I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of filler questions at the end. They weren't very interesting. Social conflict of other races in Azeroth because of the war, like the Pandaren, who are split off into both. Pandarens are Alliance and Horde. Yes, they actually do explore this in the X-Pack. It's something that's going to be played out, how each race kind of feels about the war, for example. So obviously, you could probably guess the Night Elves were really going to like it, for example, just to throw an obvious one out there. But I guess the different races are going to explore how they feel about the war throughout the X-Pack. So that'll be interesting. That's it for this Q&A. Out of all the ones I had mentioned here, I think I kept it to around 10 minutes at least. But yeah, if you have any questions about anything I talked about, I could probably clarify a little bit more. I do try to go a little bit fast because I don't want this to be as long as the actual Q&A. Other than that, please subscribe, like, share, comment, everything like that. Especially subscribe. Please subscribe. And other than that, everybody have a good one. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and please subscribe below. You can catch my gaming thoughts and activities on Twitter at RealKneecap, and you can also find me playing live on Twitch at KneecapKilla. Hopefully I'll see you soon, and of course, everybody have a good one.